Thank you for coming out and spending your Monday evening with us for a bit. We're going to start. I want to start by saying thank you to our panelists and also for Karpeles for allowing us to host this in their venue. Each of the panelists are going to discuss their fundraising specialty, and then we'll have time for questions and answers afterwards, so if you could just hold on to those, and we'll get to you after. We're going to start with Maria Rainsdon. Maria's been with Global Spectrum for 5 years and recently joined the Kniazuk team in Buffalo. Prior to that, she worked at the Clovis Civic Center in New Mexico, which hosts an average of 20 fundraising events per year of different size, scopes, and types. Maria has also served on fundraising steering committees for the United Way of Eastern Mexico, Hartley House, the domestic violence shelter, Clovis Community Band, Food Bank of Eastern New Mexico, and Big Brothers Big Sisters. Thank you, Maria.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Rainsdon. Thank you for the introduction, Elizabeth. My background in fundraising is not necessarily grants. It's more event-based. So I wanted to provide a little bit of information to you about what I would look for if I were meeting with a fundraising group that were looking to either get service, which would be volunteers showing up, or fundraising, putting together an event that would create funds for their group. The things that I would always ask were, what is your group's mission? What is the overarching goal of your group? What's your mission statement? Because that should, of course, affect what kind of event you would put on. Also, you want to know what your audience enjoys. Those folks that support you, are they golfers? Is a golf scramble the most appropriate event to put on to raise money? Or would it be, in the case of the community band, a concert because your goal is to provide music to the community? And then also looking at what the goal of the fundraising is. Do you want to raise awareness more so than funds? Is money the bottom line? And also, do you need continued involvement to make your group successful? Because you want to make sure that it's an event that can continue on annually, or maybe it's just a one-time awareness drive because your whole operation is new and you need people to know what you do and who you serve. Also, would a service event be better? Habitat for Humanity is a great example. Their events are service-based, not necessarily money-based, but when they need to raise awareness that you can come and bring goods and things to their restore to help them raise money, it's a completely different kind of drive. So when we get to the question and answer session, I don't know that I can speak much to grant writing, but I can speak to the type of events that you would want to host to achieve the overall mission of your group.
Thanks, Maria. Next up, we have Nell Mung. Nell is the Director of Strategic Development at Musical Fair Theater. She has worked in the nonprofit sector for 15 years, holding administrative and development positions with the Buffalo Museum of Science, Shakespeare and Delaware Park, Heart of the City Neighborhoods, and Gateway Longview. Prior to her involvement with not-for-profits, she practiced law in the field of employment discrimination. Currently, she sings with the Buffalo Master Chorale, an organization she helped found and previously managed.
Hello, everyone. Maria was so wonderfully brief, and I have a few more pages of notes I noticed than she did, but I'll try and be succinct about it. So I'm here to talk about individual giving and corporate sponsorship and support. Can you hear me if that stays up there? Oh, because the microphone is on. Okay. So individual giving. Individuals should be your easiest constituency to sort of pluck the fruit from, because theoretically you've got an inbuilt base of support depending upon who your service audience is, and I use the term audience sort of generically. So if you're in performing arts, then of course your audience is the people you are serving, the people who have demand in the community for what you provide. If you're a cultural institution, then you've got visitors who are coming through the door, or members. If you're perhaps in the business of offering arts education, fine arts, that sort of thing. Then you've got students, adults, children, whatever ages, who are registering for your classes. So your first and inbuilt wonderful base of support are going to be the individuals who you are serving. So they are the ones that you want to turn to when you begin an appeal, a donor-based appeal, to ask them to support your organization. And one of the wonderful things about turning to them is that they have already demonstrated some degree of support for your organization and interest in, because they have made that connection. They are utilizing your services. So they're a wonderful kind of captive audience. Speaking of sort of capturing, in order to solicit these folks for gifts and donations, of course you have to know how to reach them. So you've got to have some kind of mechanism for capturing who they are. And if you're a startup organization, it's probably going to be something simple, and maybe you're even doing it by hand. You know, you've got a list at the door and you're asking for names and contact information. Or as you expand and grow, you've got slightly more sophisticated means. If you're an established organization, you've probably got a ticketing program that is capturing all that information for you electronically when you're selling tickets. And of course, the more contact information you can collect about the people who are availing themselves of your services, the better, so that you can not only reach them via regular mail, but you can call them if you want to. You can access them via email. So it's very important to be thinking about how you're going to capture this data, how you're going to store it, and over time, how you're going to analyze it, how you're going to sort of manipulate it into reports, how that data about these individuals who support you can be used to your best advantage, so that you can continue to sort of grow your organization on the basis of the individuals who support you. Then you want to think about how are you going to reach out to them. So the most standard old-fashioned way is, of course, regular mail, which can be costly because it's paper, it's graphic design, it's postage, etc. However, I think that it is probably still the most standard vehicle for nonprofits to utilize as a way to reach their individual constituents. Other ways, of course, are email blasts or email messaging, assuming that you are capturing emails for people. You can establish on your website, if you have one, you would want to have a feature or a page where people have the opportunity to donate online. And that's a feature that is there just all the time, kind of perpetually. Whereas some of these other appeals or asks that you are doing would be at certain designated, discrete points in time throughout your year. There are other, of course, more public ways of raising money. Some of the vehicles now are Kickstarter. I don't know if there are others, and to be honest with you, I haven't used them yet. I'm just aware that they are out there as means for raising funds for your organization or even individual artists. Another factor that you want to consider is how often are you going to solicit individuals. There are schools of thought about this, basically, inundating people versus not. And so you have to make a kind of conscious decision on which side you are going to, pursue your own practices of gift appeals. And I think that all of us, as just sort of citizens in the modern world and consumers ourselves, know what it's like to be overwhelmed by the number of solicitations that you get, and in so many ways these days. So you want to put yourself in the shoes of your potential audience, these potential supporters, and ask yourself, how many times can we be reaching out to them? Especially if maybe you're messaging to these people for other kinds of things too, not just donor appeals. Maybe you're sending them messages about your season or exhibits or classes or something. So in my experience, especially where I am now at Musical Fair, we tend to, I don't know how you say this word, err on the side of less is more. So we do 3 sort of formal donor appeals throughout the year, one at the end of the calendar year, one in the spring, and one in the summer, and each of those actually goes to a different group, so that nobody is getting mailed to you for a gift ask more than once in a calendar year. Each of those mailings goes to a different kind of segmented audience. And we have grown our individual donations over time, so for the moment we're assuming that what we're doing is working, so we're going to stick with that policy of just not overburdening people with gift requests. Of course, your budget is going to be a factor too, in terms of how much money you have to spend on your appeals, and that might also help guide you in terms of what sort of vehicle you use. Naturally, doing an email message or an email blast is going to cost you way less, if anything at all, than multi-thousand piece mailing that's requiring a lot of paper and postage. Another factor to consider is the content and tone of your messaging. It's a bit of a pickle insofar as, by definition, you are asking people to give you money, so you have some need. The question, I think, becomes, how much do you want to indicate a need? And again, I think there's kind of differing schools of thought. So, do you want to stress how needy you are, tug on heartstrings, or perhaps take a more formalized approach and be upfront about what it is you need, or more importantly, what people's support can provide, not just for your organization, but for the community. In that way, you perhaps come across as less desperate and a better investment. People, I think, want to put their support, especially if it's coming out of their pocket, into organizations where they can trust that they are making a good investment, even if it's a $10 annual check. Okay, so I have found that it is good practice to indicate in your appeals the strength of your organization, what it is you're doing, perhaps the successes in your last year, what it is you're programming in your upcoming year. And within that context of strength and sort of your uniqueness, you then fold in your ask. And there are different ways you can do it, of course. What organizations need most typically is funding for their general operating. However, asking just for money because we need it to support our programming is kind of bland and not very sexy. So you want to kind of craft and package what it is you do, not in a way that's artificial or somehow removed from your actual programming, but really sell what it is you do and indicate to folks what their dollars can help support. So, for instance, at Musical Fair, we do 5 full productions throughout the year with any number of actors, musicians, directors, designers, dancers, etc. We always have to be concerned about how much we're spending in terms of our artistic talent, and that becomes a hamstring. So sometimes in certain letters we have said, if we were able to increase our gifts from individuals by 10%, we could add an extra week of programming to our shows. We could begin to think about doing more multiple cast shows in our season instead of 2 or 3 person shows, not that there's anything wrong with them. But it's a way of kind of cluing people into how their dollars actually help you and help you deliver your services to the community. You also want to typically give something to people for their support. So even in your appeal, whether it's going through the mail or email, you can suggest to them certain perks or benefits that they will be entitled to as a result of their gift to your organization. And typically you kind of scale the benefits or perks based on the size of the gift. So a standard benefit that a donor will receive is a listing. Their name will be listed, and perhaps, again, if you're a theater organization, you include a listing in a playbill. If you're a music organization, you could put that in a concert program. If you have a website, perhaps you have a page that you can devote to where you list your donors. So this is one of the ways in which you kind of recognize them and give them something of added value for their dollars, because they have taken that extra step to not only, perhaps come to your plays, to your dance, to your art galleries, but they are now also giving you money. So it's important to kind of reward them with a variety of perks. And when you get into some of the more major gifts, then of course you start to sort of up the ante in terms of what it is that you are offering to people by way of benefits. And what we have found at Musical Fair is that people absolutely thrill to, for instance, having a behind-the-scenes tour, maybe having a small exclusive dinner with our executive director and artistic director at a restaurant. And this is all at no cost to them. This is what we give back to our donors because they have supported us. These kinds of small, exclusive, private sorts of perks that you can give to your higher level donors means a lot to them. And it's not only a way of sort of compensating them, if you will, for their support of you, but what we have found over time as we do this on a regular basis is that it's a wonderful opportunity to get to know your donors face to face, of course, and also to have conversations with them about what it is that you're doing. And we have gotten absolutely terrific feedback from people through these kinds of vehicles, donors. We actually this year instituted a program of Saturday morning breakfasts for our mid-level donors. And they were full to capacity, and people were staying late, and it was just a wonderful kind of two-way street between us and them. This leads me into the kind of larger topic of donor recognition. When you get a gift, not only do you want to kind of promise and deliver on the benefits, but of course the first thing you need to do is thank them, and promptly. I remember there were times many years ago that there's some kind of standard in the industry that every gift should be thanked 7 times. I don't ascribe to that, and that seems to me a bit overdone. But you really can't thank your donors enough. And donors at all levels never take your so-called small donors for granted. So the first way that you acknowledge a donor is by giving them these benefits you promised and by thanking them. And you should do other things beyond that too, like some of these more personal things that I talked about. And this is all part of the notion of stewardship of your donors, because what matters here as a kind of fundamental philosophical underpinning is relationship. If we are not delivering what we have promised to our community and cultivating people to avail themselves of those things, then we have somehow failed. It's all about relationship building. And once you have someone who has come in the door to see your show or something, then you've got someone who you can work with and someone you can cultivate. And so it becomes a sort of labor-intensive kind of endeavor, truthfully, to be involved in fundraising, because you do have to commit to the notion that these people are individuals and care about you and are capable, potentially over the long term, of even greater and greater support. So take care of them. They are your bread and butter in all kinds of ways. So think about stewardship, think about cultivating them, think about ways you can truly thank them. In recent years, we have enlisted some of our board members to place thank you calls to our donors when they have made gifts. And it absolutely floors our donors. They don't surprise. They are surprised to get these calls. They are surprised that no one is asking them for more money. They are grateful and surprised again that it is a board member, who is they are the upper echelon in the governance structure. And they frequently, our board members, will have the opportunity, again, to engage in conversation with these folks and learn more. So it becomes this kind of constant two-way street with your audiences. Again, just to kind of get back to data capture, you need to institute some kind of system, whether it's something simple through, a Microsoft Office product like Excel, or if you have the finances and resources to begin to invest into like a software package that tracks donors. Keep track of your gifts, analyze them, review them over time, look at individuals. What are individual giving patterns? What are giving patterns throughout the season? How are people responding to your appeal letters? What kinds of things can you learn from the data that you are collecting from your donors so that you can use that data to improve what it is you do, to perhaps change your fundraising techniques? Who has perhaps increased their donation over time such that they have come out of a low, small donor level category into a mid-level? Can you begin to work with that individual now in a much more personal way to cultivate them into a sort of more major donor status? Or perhaps they'd be interested in making a planned gift to your organization, to providing some kind of major sponsorship that would give them a naming right, etc. So tracking your donor data becomes a very crucial part of your job when you're fundraising. Okay, corporate sponsorships. You should have a sort of built-in access to corporations through your board. And if you don't, then you need to start thinking about who you can attract to your board that is going to have good corporate connections, usually by virtue of who they themselves work for. So when you're populating your board, you want people who, of course, have that fundamental affinity with your organization. And some kind of skill set that you might be looking for, financial, legal, etc. But you also want people who can bring leverage and influence and dollars. So if you're in a position to attract individuals to your board who come from, some of the customary places are financial institutions and banks, or from some of the health insurance companies in the area, or other corporations. Perhaps you have a particular niche in terms of what you do in the arts sector, where you are working with certain corporations. So you want to get those folks on your board because they are going to be your first line of access when you want to start tapping into corporate dollars. The wonderful thing too, when you are able to have on your board people with corporate connections and large corporate employers, is that you basically get a twofer through that board member, because you have every right to ask for and expect that they will donate to you personally, because they are individuals, so they become part of your individual giving plan, and you also want to tap into their resources vis-a-vis their corporation. So it's a wonderful kind of duality that you should be getting from some of your board members. Corporations, they want a return on their investment, not that individuals don't. But corporations are in business to make money. And one of the ways, as we all know, living in this culture, that they make money is, or they increase the likelihood of making money, is through exposure. So what they are going to want from you typically is ways that you can promote them. So if they offer you a fair amount of money to sponsor a season, to sponsor an exhibit, to sponsor some kind of class, then what they are going to want from you in return is their name. the different ways that you can market them out in the community. That's what speaks to them. That's what helps them in terms of competition in the community. So give thought to all the different ways in which you can market a corporate sponsor when they make a sizable donation or sponsorship to you. So you want to think about all the different sorts of surfaces or platforms that you can literally sell to them. So if it's, again, a theater playbill, then their logo, is going to be perhaps on the front of the playbill, or it's going to be an ad somewhere in the playbill. Same thing with a concert program. Everywhere else you can think of, your website, Facebook, invitations, posters, signs, press releases, media websites, radio spots. If they have given you a sizable sponsorship, then that's the kind of thing they're going to be looking for, that sort of exposure, and that's what you want to be able to offer them. So think creatively about where and how you can aid their exposure. For instance, at Musical Fair, we sell the back of our ticket. That becomes an actual thing that a corporation could sponsor, or it becomes a perk that a sponsor at a certain level gets for a season, their logo on the back of our ticket. We also do the same with our ticket envelope. A few years ago, we invested in a large screen flat TV in our lobby, and that's where we also will advertise our corporate foundation donors. So it's always good to be thinking about how you can get their name and logo out there. Another sort of built-in corporate constituency that you might have within your family already are vendors. Who are you doing business with? And then using Musical Fair as an example, dry cleaner. I mean, that just makes sense. We go through costumes and people are sweating them up all the time. So we have a fantastic relationship with a local dry cleaner. We also, because we're building sets, are making frequent purchases and forays to Home Depot and Lowe's and Joann Fabrics, etc. So when you've established a good relationship with those vendors, and make it personal, get to know people there, think about and explore the possibility of asking them for something greater, some kind of donation or sponsorship in addition to the business relationship that you already have with them. Think about also expanding your connections and partnerships to businesses in the community. Maybe businesses that are in your locale. I think a good word of wisdom, and although I haven't done it yet, so do as I do, not as do as I say, not as I do, and that is to join your local chambers of commerce and get to know the businesses and firms that are in your neighborhood. That's a better way of learning your community. It's also a better way of understanding these corporations and what sorts of challenges they face and what kinds of needs they have. And begin to explore the ways that you might have something that is useful to them. Perhaps you have a facility that you could rent out, or a space in your facility that would be perfect for some kind of small company in your area that needs a meeting space, or that needs some kind of special facility to do a presentation or something for their clients, etc. We, again, Musical Fair in Amherst, we established a relationship years ago with Brodo Restaurant, and they will do some of our catering. We will have some of these major dinners on site at their restaurant, and we've got a terrific business relationship with their owner there, so that we are paying them for what they provide us, but we also know that now and then we can ask for donated food, small events to be catered. So that's a wonderful way also to begin to kind of establish business relationships with corporations. The last thing that I would say is that all of these different ways in which you are reaching out to constituencies in your community, you don't want to ever do any of them in isolation, your individual giving, your corporate asks, your special events, even your grant writing, because you want to be strategic and smart about your fundraising. So it's best, if you can, to think about your year, to plot out your year, and plan when you're going to do your individual gift asks. Plan when you're going to do a special organization. If you're a performing arts organization and you've got a box office that's selling tickets, make sure that you're coordinating your messaging that's going out with their messaging that might be, when they're sending out their subscription renewals to ticket purchasers, so that you're not inundating, again, people with multiple messaging. You're being smart from your bottom line, and you're being sensitive to the audiences that you're reaching out to. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Nell. Next up, we have Catherine Schweitzer to talk a bit about grants. Catherine is the Executive Director of the Baird Foundation, a private family foundation in Buffalo, New York. The foundation was established in 1947 and funds a wide range of organizations, primarily in the Western New York area. Ms. Schweitzer has been with the foundation for 18 years. The trustees are known for their deep personal connection to the history, stories, and artifacts of the region, as well as their investments in people and organizations that contributed positively to our quality of life, including the Boys and Girls Clubs in Buffalo, the rare book collection at the Buffalo and Erie County Library, Old Fort Niagara in Lewiston, Frank Lloyd Wright's Great Cliff in Derby, the James Joyce Collection at the University of Buffalo, the Buffalo History Museum, the Theodore Roosevelt Inaugural Site, the Birchfield Penny, Preservation Buffalo Niagara, among others, as well as organizations associated with education, healthcare, community building, and the environment. Ms. Schweitzer served in the volunteer leadership of the Erie County Cultural Resources Committee for 10 years, a citizen advisory board that made recommendations to 2 county executives for annual distribution of approximately $5 million to benefit almost 50 arts and cultural organizations, several with significant collections of regional, national, and international importance. In service to County Executive polling cars, she currently chairs the re-established Erie County Cultural Advisory Board. She has served as a trustee of educational, artistic, human relations, healthcare, historic preservation, and community development organizations. Ms. Schweitzer recently served as chair of the Women's and Children's Hospital Foundation, the Buffalo Philharmonic Chorus, and as founding chair of Preservation Buffalo Niagara. Currently, she represents New York State as one of the delegates from the state to the Board of Advisors of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and was the co-chair of the National Preservation Conference held in Buffalo in October 2011. She also serves as chair of Fine Hands Music Hall Management, Inc., as a trustee of Great Cliff in the Buffalo Historical Museum, and as a member of the advisory boards of LISC Buffalo and Niagara University School of Hospitality and Tourism, among others. Thank you, Catherine.
Good evening. It's going to be a real pleasure to speak with you tonight because Nell has introduced so many of the concepts that I had hoped to share with you tonight, and I promise you we did not do a tag team and speak in advance about what her main points would be, so I get to reinforce all the good messages she's already delivered. I was told tonight that there are some real novices in the room around fundraising, and there are some real experts. And I will try and touch both ends of that spectrum and leave questions for the end. So if you have any specific questions or want more information, I know anyone on the panel would be interested in providing that. I'm going to cover 3 main things, the basic terms, a few tips, and the last, some personal opinions about grant submissions. Under the basic terms for not-for-profits, the question always is, where does the money come from? You have earned revenue, so from theaters, it could be tickets to shows, or for galleries, you also have admission prices. It could also be sponsorships and fee for service. The other main category is contributed revenue. Under that category, you have membership, annual fund, sometimes sponsors, major gifts, capital campaigns, and grants. So what are these grants? Where do they come from? Well, there are 3 major categories for those. There are public grants, there are corporate grants, and there are foundation grants. And now to make it even more complicated for you, the foundation grants get subdivided again into a grant from a community foundation, which is chartered differently than other types of foundations. There are public foundations, and there are independent foundations and family foundations. I happen to be an expert on one foundation, the Baird Foundation, which is a family foundation, and I'm also a voyeur to other foundations. So I watch what's going on in the sector, but I really only know deeply the foundation that I work for. So one of the things that Todd asked me to mention is that if you are in a hurry for funds, grants are not your route to success. It's like slow cooking. It takes a while. And some foundations will have a very elaborate process. Some have a very simple process. Some of the applications are only processed once a year. So the Steel Foundation and the Community Foundation, which just had its letter of intent deadline at the end of January, there's no other chance to apply to that foundation. East Hill's deadline, I think, is in August, and that's it for the year. We don't get another opportunity. Others have monthly meetings, like the ASI Foundation, and then there are others that have no schedule, like the foundation that I work for. So my suggestion to you is to create a calendar. I think Nell already mentioned this. She was talking about some of the other activities that you have in managing your not-for-profit. But your grant schedule should be on a whiteboard in front of everyone, so everyone sees those deadlines, so that they know that the information they provide to whoever is writing the grant, they have access to it in plenty of time. So anyone old enough to remember Bill Clinton's campaign and that great logo, "It's the economy, stupid"? Remember that? That was a huge sign in the office where the key workers were, and every day when they would look up from their desk, that's what they saw. For your organization, it should be your whiteboard with your grant deadlines and basically a dashboard of information that drives your organization. Everyone has access to it, everybody contributes to it, it's visible and accessible all the time. Okay. So I would also say that some of the deadlines are not published, so it's not always easy to find out those deadlines, but the more that you can get onto your calendar and your whiteboard, the more ready you will be. So my second tip would be to follow the rules. Number one, read the application. It is amazing how frequently people answer or provide information that is not asked for, that they completely miss the question. So how many times have you watched politicians be interviewed on the nightly news and you're frustrated because you liked the question the reporter asked, but the answer isn't even close to the question? That happens in philanthropy as well. That happens in grant review. That you're asked for ABC and you get MNO. So be careful when you read the application to make sure you answer the question. Deadlines. They are the absolute line in the sand. Do not miss the deadline. Even if your grant is accepted after a deadline, you've got strikes against you. You've already created a bias against your proposal. Completeness. Make sure that you have answered every single question. Make sure you have attached every single document, supporting document. The next one is kind of humorous because I am not a neatnik, but it drives me crazy to get a letter and the ink is smudged. So I have a hard time reading it. That creates a negative bias against your proposal. Be patient, let the ink dry, then put it in the envelope. Okay, signatures. Most applications require a signature, and they are supposed to be from an authorized person, and it will say what person. So if it says board chair, don't have the executive director sign the application. Make sure you get the right person. It isn't any signature. It's a very specific signature. Do you owe a report to a foundation for a past grant? If you do, don't apply again until you supply that report. Because again, strikes against you when you go to the review committee, they're going to ask, hey, didn't we give this wonderful theater or this wonderful singing group or this wonderful historical association a grant 2 years ago? Did they recognize the grant? Did they put in their final closeout report? They're going to check their paperwork. And did they receive it from you? If the answer is no, you're going to the bottom of the heap. Okay, the golden rule. It's not what you think it is. He who has the money makes the rules. Remember that. You're not going to like the rules, and you want to change the rules, but the rules are the rules, as created by the person who has the money that you want. Okay, the next thing I want to cover is the screening of your application. There is a lot of competition. A lot of competition. So chances of success are low. I mean, you're going to have to keep trying, or you maybe decide it's not the best option for you right now, or whatever. But the intensity of the competition has accelerated in the last, say, 5 to 10 years. There's an issue called donor fatigue. Sometimes your best supporters just decide to move on, not because you did anything wrong, but because they just want to try something else. That happens with foundations too. Here's a helpful tip, I think. Budget year. Look at the budget year for the foundations to whom you are applying. If their fiscal year ends March 30th, or 31st, let's say March, then they're out of money, basically, around January or February. They're not going to be awarding a lot of grants. So you want to be in the pool of grants that's going to be reviewed April 1st, when they have the most amount of money in the budget for the year. So think in advance. The same thing works with corporate sponsorships or corporate grants. Corporations plan months, sometimes even a year in advance for their philanthropy. So if you are applying in November for an event in February, it's probably no, just on timing, not because they don't like what you're doing, but you just didn't get to them soon enough. So think about who you're applying to and what their needs are. Review committees are looking for reasons to say no. They don't want to read 60 applications or 100 applications. They want to look at 10 or 20. So if your application was late or incomplete, or you didn't answer every question, or whatever other reason you've given them to put your application aside, it will be put aside. So you control the barriers to yes. Okay, so if you could find ways to get to yes, let's think about Nell's suggestion to emphasize your uniqueness, your accomplishments, your positive success in the community, and find different ways of saying that. Okay, I'm going to digress for a second and make a comment about public grants. The review for public grants is much more formulaic. There's often a spreadsheet you have to fit into a box, and then within the box you're within a range. So if your metric doesn't fit, it gets kicked out. So that happens with a lot of public review for bids and things like that. So the same rules basically apply to a grant process with a public sector, whether it's New York State or the federal reviews or even Erie County. So foundation grants allow the most leniency or leeway, the most opportunity for discussion, and actually there are times when a foundation that is focused on, say, medical research or the health sector might actually support something in the arts, or might support something in environmental education. It isn't always an obvious connection for you, but those trustees have the leeway to decide they want to do something that's a little off-center. That's not the case with the public sector. Okay. And also with foundation grants, you have an opportunity for follow-up. You might get more questions asked of you by a program officer, which gives you a chance to explain yourself or clarify or add additional information. So what do these grants do? What kind of money, what could you use the money for? Well, the one that everyone wants is general operating. Sorry to say that is the hardest money to find. The good news is, in the foundation press, for the last maybe 3 or 4 years, there have been a number of articles advocating for support for just core mission. If you believe in the mission of an organization, send the money. Stop making organizations chase the money. Stop making them invent new programs for money. So this idea of sticking to your mission and understanding your mission and understanding how you deliver on your mission is going to become increasingly important, and you're going to have to defend it. Back to Nell's suggestion about your metrics, analyzing your data, not just about your donors and your audience, but also on other dimensions, which I'm not going to get into just yet. Often grants are project specific. So if you needed office equipment, or you needed to repair a roof, or you needed extra training for your staff, those are project specific grants. Those are much easier to get than general operating. Two other types which are very similar are matching grants or challenge grants. And so a challenge grant would be a donor might provide you with a couple $1,000 and say to your organization, for every new or increased dollar to your annual fund, we will match it dollar for dollar up to a certain amount. Or if you raise $20,000, we'll give you $20,000 more. But the donor decides what those boundaries are around matches and challenges. Tough one to consider are reimbursement grants. Often those are provided by New York State. You have to have the capital to do the project and then be paid back by the state. That's where organizations get in trouble. They are successful in the application, they are awarded the grant, often there are public moments with photo ops, and then the project doesn't happen because there's not a line of credit or cash flow that allows the project to be completed. Therefore, the state cannot be invoiced, and you don't get your money. One example I'll share is Great Cliff. They got a grant to reimburse them for purchasing a property from the Purist Fathers. After 5 years of trying to get the money from the state, Carol Bronikamp, who was a volunteer acting as an executive director, in tears came to me and said, there are no more ways that I can say we bought the property. I can't get creative about it, we simply bought the property. And the state was not paying for 5 years. They were lucky that the Baird Foundation where I work supplied that line of credit that allowed the project to be completed, and then they paid back the line of credit when they actually got the money from the state. But we learned firsthand how horrific these reimbursement grants can be. So a word of caution for anyone who is looking at those types of opportunities. The last type is the capital grants, which would be for building a new building or renovating space or adding a new program. Okay, so another question that Todd asked me to discuss was the opportunities for grant writers. What are the pros and cons? And the answer is really it's the best fit for your situation. How much staffing do you have? How sophisticated is your staffing? How much experience do you have researching or writing grants? The benefits of a grant writer, they know the process. They understand the language. It's almost like a new code, if you will. Another benefit, a grant writer knows that they are responsible for the production and delivery of that grant. Therefore, one person is bird-dogging the whole process. The bad news is the grant writer depends on your organization to supply the data, to supply the information. And you may not be prepared to give the grant writer the information the grant writer needs. So you're paying for service, and you've got a grant writer who's frustrated because they can't finish the project because you're not supplying the data. So make sure that you are ready before you hire a grant writer to do something for you. There's another rule. Garbage in, garbage out. Make sure the quality of your information is useful. The pro for having an in-house person do a grant proposal, no one knows your organization better than you do. The knowledge resides inside your organization. Second point, the awareness to detail. is not transferable. No one cares more about your organization than you do, and your staff, who every day work to deliver that mission. There will be subtleties to information that you will catch, and you will know, and you can promote, that someone from the outside just isn't going to get it. So here's a suggestion. Is there someone on your staff, including yourself, who could have their skills upgraded with some training? Is there someone looking to make more money? If you provided the training for them to become a grant writer inside your organization, would you pay them more if they took on that responsibility? Something to think about. Another helpful hint, I hope. I should also declare that I too write grants as a volunteer for organizations, and I just did one for the ASI Foundation. So I know what it's like to load that stuff up on the computer and not have all the documents ready in a folder on my computer, to have those last 2 audited financial statements and the 501c3 and the, whatever else I needed to have. So I was scrambling around for a couple of hours that day because I wasn't ready. So a tip to you is, have it ready in advance, not on the due date. You know you're going to need these materials either for the Erie County submission, for perhaps a board meeting, or for a state grant. Have all your things in a folder that says, basic documents for grants. Make sure it's up to date. I uploaded a spreadsheet with board information. After I loaded it, I looked at it, and it had been given to me from an organization. I sit on the board, so I asked for the board list. I didn't read it. I loaded it. It was the prior year. Okay, I can catch that because I know who's on the board. I know who the officers are. An outside grant writer wouldn't have caught that. It just would have been up there. So those are the subtleties of whether you hire someone or not hire someone. Prepare your information in advance. Proofread it. Make sure you have everything that's up to date. Your component parts for grants. We found this in the Erie County Review last year, that there were a number of inconsistencies between the CDP reports, the 990s, the essay questions. The parts just didn't fit. Whether it's the board list and you say you have 15 people on your board, and then on your CDP you say you have 20, and then somewhere else you'll see it's 12. It's like, well, what's the number? So make sure that when you're reading all those documents at the same time, the way a county reviewer is, that all the answers match. Use your 990 to your best advantage. There are some places on the 990 where an accountant will just simply copy and paste the same information more than once. Actually, the IRS is giving you an opportunity to sell your organization in multiple ways on that document. Use them, don't just give them away. And one tip, you can look for 990s on the various foundations in Western New York and see who they're giving money to. I should say giving, providing grants to. Okay, here's an audience participation question. How many of you think of yourselves as philanthropists? Are you a philanthropist? Raise your hand if you are a philanthropist. Okay, slow hands. You are all philanthropists. The definition of the word is love of mankind. So you love the world. You wouldn't be in the not-for-profit sector if you were not a philanthropist. So gifts begin with you. The importance of participation is the next category I want to talk about. So let's talk about who you work for. You work for a nonprofit corporation. There seems to be a creative tension between those two words, nonprofit and corporation. Did anyone read the paper the last couple of days about the Sinatra company? How many, okay, let's start over again. He had a golden Rolodex, right? Golden. Best donors in America for the Republican Party. And he's working for this real estate company, and he's trying to get it started in Buffalo, New York. How many people did he solicit to invest in his project in Buffalo, New York?
Who's many?
50. He got turned down 50 times before he got his funding. That takes a lot of courage, tenacity, patience, or belief in what he's doing. Belief that, these projects in Buffalo will return on the investment for any capitalist worthy of, any return that they could imagine anywhere else. Buffalo's a hot place. It's the same thing with your organizations, that your annual fund donors are taking out a one-year option on your program, on your mission, on your leadership. It's a renewable one-year option. They may or may not come back. Grants are, in essence, your equity partners, the way there is equity in a corporation. They are investing for the longer term. As Nell mentioned, you want to pay a lot of attention to your friends who contribute resources to you, whether it's time, whether it's treasure, whether it's connections, introducing you to other people. It's the same thing with grants. So there's an important question appearing on more and more grant applications. What is the percentage of participation for your board? And unfortunately, we're seeing it's a low percent. So how many of you are executive directors? Not too many, okay. Hopefully you are making the first gift to the annual fund every year. Very first one, first money in is your own. Lead by example. How many of you are development directors? Fewer, okay. Hopefully yours is the second gift. You should be contributing, and then the board. So the stretch is for 100% participation, and remember, no foundation is giving you anything. You are receiving an investment. So you have to kind of shift your mental model and say it's not a gift. Yes, it's categorized as a donation or contribution, but it really is an investment. Okay, next category, magical thinking. Does anyone know what that is? It's like living in some other reality. Okay. So for grants, there is no magic font, there's no special paper, there's no special password, and there's no reward without doing the work first. Okay? It's hard work. Gathering the information, answering the questions, etc. Next category is communication. Have a 30-second elevator speech ready at any time. You never know who you're going to bump into. It could be a foundation staff person like me, it could be a trustee of a foundation, it could be a CEO of a corporation that you're looking to get a sponsorship from, it could be anybody. It has to be just on the tip of your tongue, ready to go. There's a principle in communication called communication channels. It's like a radio. You're either on send or receive. Beware of always being on send when you are with your donors. You want to hear what they have to say. You want to listen to their priorities, listen to their needs, listen to their interests and their dreams, perhaps, for your organization. Next rule in communication, no complaining, no whining. Remember, you don't make the rules. Respect the staff. They represent their trustees for a reason. And staff is your advocate during the review process. So the more the staff knows about your mission, your organization, the project you are promoting, the better the success rate for you in the review. Beware of gender bias. I didn't think I'd have to say that in 2014, but it just happened to me a couple of months ago. We're a very sophisticated organization that has done extremely well with their fundraising. We were set to grant a $25,000 award to the organization, and someone in the organization treated me like a little girl, screaming at me, and I had to report it to my trustees because they travel in the circles with the trustees of that organization. And they left $15,000 on the table. So it went from $25,000 to $10,000 because of a stupid mistake of losing someone's temper and belittling me. I had a pretty thick hide. And at the end of the day, I still advocated for the project and hoped my trustees would keep that $25,000 on the table. but they were incensed that their representative was treated that way. So I know that Robert Joy of the O'Shea Foundation would not be treated the way I was treated. So be careful. If your trustees, be careful. It's a subtlety, even though we become friends during our interchanges, you just can't be rude. Okay, enough of that. I have 3 rules of communication, as Nell said a little bit ago. Try not to do what I do, but follow what I say. There's a need to know, a right to know, and a courtesy to know. And in your grant applications, you'll probably invoke all 3 layers of that rule. When you work with your boards, there will be, again, those same layers, or your donors, or your neighbors, or whomever. But if you can think about the information from your organization at those 3 levels, you won't have a problem. Okay, next rule is the double bottom line, and I'm going to add one to actually make it a triple bottom line. The first is mission. You work for a mission. Peter Drucker established a rule long ago, 11 words or less. That way everyone remembers it. And the way that he promoted his rule of 11 words or less was short enough to be printed on the front of a t-shirt. Therefore, everyone in the organization knows what you're aiming for all the time. So find ways to explain how your mission is delivered. Most missions come in at like 50 words. It's too long, it's too complicated, and they lose focus. Explain how your organization makes a difference. Because, or how, or where, or when, with whom. Okay, the second part of the double bottom line is your management. Have your metrics, know your metrics. Nell really explained perfectly, capturing your data, analyzing your data, storing your data, reviewing your data again. What are the changes? What are the patterns? Sometimes your $5 donor can become a $1 million donor. Or actually, in Children's Hospital case, that $5 donor became a $5 million donor. Because the staff at Children's Hospital realized that that $5 gift had been arriving every year in a money order since 1950. Amazing story. And they ended up receiving a gift of $5 million at the end of the gentleman's life. Okay. Look for opportunities for cooperation. When we started today, I said there's a lot of competition out there. The more you can show that you are working with other nonprofits, the more attention you're going to get from funders. There isn't enough money for philanthropy to be the safety net for a community, nor can it be the main support for a lot of the arts and cultural organizations. It also provides you with new stories to share in reports, or in newsletters, or with donors, casual interactions. And now the last, actually my double bottom line, not triple bottom line, I just realized they're all M's, mission, management, and the last word is mindfulness. So Louis Pasteur rule is what I call this one. Chance favors the prepared mind. Read the business pages. Read business first. What are the regional priorities, the regional economic development plan? Look for announcements and awards. A lot of foundations are announcing who they've given grants to, or it's being reported by the organizations themselves. You can look for people who are joining foundation boards. You can look for all kinds of things in the little filler in the Buffalo News. Sometimes in Olaf Fudd you can find little intrigues that might lead you to a gift or a new donor. Another really good place to look are the annual reports of nonprofits. Someone who's already a donor is much more inclined to be a repeat donor, not just to this organization where you see their name, but for other organizations as well. So look at the reports for Roswell, or Canisius College, or Children's Hospital, or Shakespeare in Delaware Park, or whomever. That's your research, in addition to looking at ASI's website or reading the paper. So now I'm going to get to my last category, which are hopefully just tips. Make your gift first. Make it a stretch gift. Make your board participate. both gifts and helping you say thank you. Establish a culture of appreciation. Find ways to say thank you, both formal and informal, and the serendipitous ones when you find somebody in line in front of you at the Lexington Co-op or Wegmans or the dry cleaner. And this rule, there's no statute of limitations on when and where you can say thank you. You can always say thank you again. So remember your donors, especially those who provide in-kind support. And if a grant was used for, say, equipment, yes, I know you already sent the letter, you sent the receipt, but you could have that aha moment and say, wow, it was so great to have that printer today because it helped us get whatever accomplished. We should really tell the Oshai Foundation how important this office equipment was to our operation. Or you got to deliver more meals at Meals on Wheels because somebody helped fund the commissary. And a year later, tell them that, or 6 months later, when you realize that those grants made a difference in your day-to-day delivery on your mission. Okay, no stalking trustees. When they are out at cocktail parties or events, they are not interested in your application to the foundation where they are going to be making a decision. They have staff for that. Doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to them. Talk to them about your mission, talk about what exciting things are happening at your organization, but don't pester them about your application. Stand in the shoes of the reviewer to make sure that you can see their perspective. Nell said this also. Stand in the shoes of the reviewer, the reader. Does your application make sense? Do the parts fit? Are you clear in your language? So often we see letters that go blah, 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 we need money. Make it focused, make it direct. Forget all that flowery language. Be clear in what you're trying to accomplish and what you need the money for. Know your numbers. I know I've said that a couple of times, and Nell has said that. I think the best thing I ever did was take an accounting course, and the second best thing I did was take a managerial accounting course. First accounting course is for your financial statements that the outside world looks at. Managerial accounting is the inside knowledge of your own organization, understanding your own trends, understanding your own data. And I'm sure ECC has a course, maybe there are even night classes at Amherst High School or wherever. They aren't expensive. It will do anyone a world of good. My son did it, but my daughter didn't yet. But I keep saying to my kids, you need an accounting course. Everyone needs it. Beware of holding information so tightly that you starve your organization of oxygen. Gets back to sharing, gets back to selfishness. Try to be a partner with your board, a partner with other staff members, a partner with other organizations. We will be stronger together. And the more we work together, the stronger our community will be. 80% of philanthropy comes from individuals. So I would remind you that trustees of foundations are also individuals, and sometimes they become donors to organizations, even if you don't receive a grant from that foundation. Perhaps 80% of your time should go to finding or renewing or sustaining your existing donors, rather than some new enterprise that will take years to develop. There is an opportunity cost to your time. If you're putting a lot of time into grants and you're coming up with a zero, that meant all that time didn't go towards something else, whatever that might be. So do a cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth 20 hours to put together this proposal, or 10 hours, or however long it's going to take you, versus what else you could do with that time? Beware of your urgency or desperation. It doesn't sell well. Everybody is hurting. Everybody needs money. The arts and cultural sector is hurting. It's out of favor right now. The poor is out of favor right now. So it's a time of scarcity. And we recognize it. And I certainly know from the Baird Foundation, we are a small foundation, we don't have a lot of money. It's hard to make decisions with the limited resources that we have. We wish we had the resources of a very large foundation, but we don't. So when we get the letters that are desperate, you're giving us a reason to say we can't save a sinking ship. We want to invest in a place that's going towards the future. So again, you can manage the barriers to getting to yes. The last tip I have for you is to be honest. That eventually foundations find out what's going on in your organization. And so if you try to make everything sweetness and light and it's not going to serve you well. So with that, I will end, and everyone, I guess Todd, you're going to speak. And thank you for your attention.
Has to get a lot higher. Apparently I need no introduction, or at least I'm not going to get one. My name is Todd Kniazuk. I'm the Executive Director of Art Services Initiative of Western New York, and I'm here tonight to speak about some specific services that ASI provides that can help you in your development efforts. First off, though, again, I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank Karpeles for hosting us, and I want to thank Elizabeth Borngraver. She's our program coordinator at ASI, and she's been charged with putting together these trainings. I will mention that our next training is coming up on Saturday, April 12th, and that's going to be on the Nonprofit Revitalization Act. If you're a nonprofit organization, please consider coming to this because it affects every nonprofit organization. So it's definitely something that we need more information on, and we're going to have a representative of the New York Council of Nonprofits in to talk about that. There are some changes going into effect in July that, relatively minor as long as everyone stays on top of it, but definitely please join us for that. So at ASI, we're charged with advocacy, capacity building, and collaboration for individual artists and cultural organizations. And I know that as Catherine mentioned that 11-word rule, I was counting the number of words in our mission, and it's a little bit beyond 11, but we are 5 counties. So on capacity building, a decision was made when ASI was being created not to directly try to raise funds for any one organization. And the idea there was that there's so much need, as is evident by our speakers today and by all of you being here, that it really would have been impossible for us to pick individual organizations and help them directly raise money. But that being said, we've tried to do our best to position organizations so that they can raise money for themselves. I mean, this training session is a good example of that. But we really want to help you get the information you need, and that starts at our website at asiwny.org. On that website, we have a list of local, national, regional foundations, corporate foundations, private foundations, governments, and direct links for you to go to those websites and learn more about them. We also have a calendar with deadlines, so that's a place you can start. As was mentioned, though, not every foundation has a deadline. Not every donor that you're looking at is going to be on that website because sometimes it takes a personal connection, or depending on your discipline or field, there may be some very specialized funders out there. And so you're going to have to do some of your own work, but asiwny.org is a good place to start. Also, when you're at that website, please sign up for our Facebook page, please follow us on Twitter, and sign up for our e-newsletters. We try to break news as often as possible and as timely as possible through our social media, and then follow up with our monthly e-newsletters. And so as someone like the Community Foundation releases their letter of intent calendar, we tend to put that on Facebook right away. If you wait for our monthly e-newsletter, you'll be a little bit behind, and sometimes the window of opportunity is only about a month. So, social media, the strength of it is immediacy, the weakness of it is that information goes away very quickly. And so if you monitor those pages and sign up for the newsletter, that should help you. We're also going to be launching in the next month or two a second monthly newsletter. The ones we've been sending have been about opportunities. I'm just going to stop playing with that. The ones that we've been sending so far have been about opportunities, and that's definitely going to be the cornerstone of what we do. But what we've heard tonight and what we've seen in the field is that it's very helpful to think about best practices. It's very helpful to think about breaking trends of research, such as the overhead myth, which is really, getting into some detail about what is overhead and why has it been looked at as such a bad thing and what it really is. And it'll help you tell your story. Things like that, like understanding that your staff, your executive director, or even your development director really help you meet your mission and help you do what you do as organizations. And I think things like that really work well. It also helps you identify that opportunity cost that was being talked about. When you're writing a grant or planning a special event, everyone tends to put together a budget for those things. The hard costs, the costs of renting the room or getting the refreshments and then figuring out the ticket price. But how many of you really stop and actually add in the staff costs? The amount of time that your staff or even volunteers are spending on those events or on those grants in order to make them successful. That's a cost that needs to be analyzed. Likewise, though, the benefits beyond raising money in awareness, in fundraising, that little cliche there, have to be somehow thought about as well. And so we're going to start up a newsletter that brings you some of this information, links to some of these newsletters, some of these articles, just to help you get a little more rounded of a picture. It's a lot to read, but hopefully we can give at least brief summaries and get you started. There are a couple of upcoming opportunities for funding, and most of these are public sector, and most of them have been mentioned. The Regional Economic Development Council, which is a beast to wade into, but could be appropriate for some of you. They have what's called a consolidated funding application, and it's consolidated only in the sense that the same application is used for every state agency that's putting money into this process. It's not consolidated for you, because if you file more than one application, you still have to do separate ones for each project. The good news there, though, is the New York State Council on the Arts, for the last couple of years, has had money into that consolidated funding application. And what we saw last year is that they started to actually tailor some of that money. So there was general funding that was available that if you think about yourself and you're a NISCA-funded agency, you might then also be qualified for a separate grant from this CFA. What that means, though, is first off, the grant limits that are imposed by NISCA don't count for this. And if you've got a NISCA grant, you can also apply for CFA. On the other hand, though, there's an additional layer of scrutiny that you have to align with the Regional Economic Development Council's goals. And some of those are entrepreneurship, tourism is a targeted agency, is a targeted sector, smart growth, but think creatively. If your organization is located in an area where reinvestment is occurring, where local governments are targeting for reinvestment in an urban area, you could be contributing to that smart growth reinvestment. So really be thinking about how you might fit in. But on ASI's side, we're advocating for the strengthening of language about arts and culture, and not just connected to tourism, but arts and culture as a sector, to be added into the Regional Economic Development Council's plan, which then hopefully will strengthen some of our applications and all. Erie County will be coming up. Catherine and I know all about that as we serve together on that review board. The City of Buffalo currently has $200,000 for this current budget year. Their year is July 1 to June 30th. And so this budget year that we're in right now, that ends June 30th of 2014, there's $200,000. We're working with the city to try to get that money released as soon as possible. Candidly, I wouldn't expect a very thorough review process on that, the way Erie County is in place. But this year, it's hopefully about getting the money out and then working with them to establish a little bit more equity-based and peer-based review process for the next year. But the good news there is that the mayor in his State of the City address announced that there would be $250,000 recurring for at least the next 3 years in his draft budgets, which is definitely a step forward, considering where we were a few years ago there. The New York State Council of the Arts directly has funding and has many categories of funding. How many of you here apply to NISCA? Oh, not a whole lot. Definitely look at the New York State Council on the Arts. There are many, many categories there, everything from education to music to presenting. For some of you who do get NISCA funding now, you may want to look at some of the other categories, because things like presenting, which basically means you're bringing in performing artists from out of town to appear at your venue. There's some rules attached to that, and you have to have at least 5 over the course of the year. But there are horribly few of those presenting applications from Western New York compared to the rest of the state. And yet probably a few dozen, if not more, organizations that could potentially benefit from that. One thing that I think was alluded to but not explicitly stated, and this is definitely the case with NISCA, when you read one of their categories and you think, hey, this might be for me, call them up. They actually want to talk with you. They want to talk with you before you put in an application. Because if you're really not good for that program, they don't want you to put in an application because they got to process all of that, and it would just be a waste of your time and theirs. What I found in personal experience, though, when I was with Music is Art, we thought, hey, music is art. Music, that'll work. And we called them up, and it turns out it didn't. And we had a couple of different folks to go through, but every time we went to one person, their answer was no, but their answer was no, but have you tried this other piece of NISCA? Until we finally got to the right place. And it was really amazing that they spent that amount of time working us through as a first-time applicant from a small organization. And I know that they're short-staffed, but I know that they do work with you on those things. If you're not at NISCA, you could still be receiving state money through NISCA, and that's called DEC, or the regrants. And ASI is the DEC site for Erie and Niagara counties. So if you're a smaller organization, a newer organization, even a non-arts organization that does arts programming, for instance, a municipality with a summer concert series, or a social service agency that teaches art classes to their constituents, you can apply for funding directly through ASI. It's a lot easier than applying through NISCA, for full NISCA. So if you've looked at that full NISCA and said, there's no way I can pull that off, you might want to come through DEC. With that, we'll be starting information sessions around August, and it'll be an early fall application. And we offer early review on that process, so we can actually review your application if you get it in a couple weeks ahead of time and give you some feedback. Not on the program itself, but we may say we didn't understand the answer to question number 2, or probably more often your budget doesn't add up, so you may want to go back and look at that again. We also offer some grants through Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation for programming along the Buffalo River. Unfortunately, the next opportunity there is 2015. But one thing I would suggest on any of these, and I would say start now, because most of what I talk to you about is coming up soon. It's coming up in late spring, early summer. Go onto these sites, and probably less so the narrative questions, but definitely look at those attachments. The attachments are at the end of the application, and so you're working on the application, and it's due in a couple hours, and then you get to the attachments, and there are 12 of them. And they are things that need updating, and there are things that you're like, oh my God, how am I going to do these? I mean, the idea of the folder is definitely good. But the reason I'm saying look at the attachments are because all of those things there, the strategic plan, the cash flow forecasts, the budgeting, developing your board, those are all services that ASI can help you with. Those are all things that we provide technical assistance with, and expertise and trainings, not just sector-wide trainings. We'll come work with your individual organization. We've helped a few get in under the gun for the Erie County funding and finish those last things. So look at those now, don't wait. And if there's anything that we can help you with, we'll be happy to. One last funding opportunity I want to talk to you about, and this is actually the big announcement. If any of you do follow us on Facebook, this was what I teased you with earlier. How many of you heard of Gift for Greatness? Few, right? Gift for Greatness is a really great thing that started a couple of years ago through Art Voice. It became a nonprofit organization, and it's raised a couple $100,000 for the arts so far. We're proud to announce today that Give for Greatness is going to become a program of Art Services Initiative. And what that's going to allow is that's going to allow for all of the good work of Give for Greatness to continue. It's going to mean that through the generosity of Fund for the Arts, we're going to be able to hire a full-time development director that will be charged primarily with raising money for the cultural sector. Because our mission is 5 county, Give for Greatness is going to become 5 county, so if you're in Erie, Niagara, Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, or Allegheny, you're going to be able to apply for some of this money being raised. And it also takes this great idea, and I definitely want to make sure that we thank Art Voice, and we thank the Give for Greatness Board of Directors. Jim Linker, their president, is here today. They've laid an incredible base. They've started with some great work, and we're proud to be able to continue that. Let the development director do their work and raise money, and ASI is going to be able to provide the support for that, whether it be the bookkeeping, the outreach, all of the technical stuff that has to happen to support an initiative like this. So the last things I want to say about that are, first off, if you applied in 2013, you're not going to need to apply again. We're going to have those applications and we're going to be able to consider those. We're going to do a round of funding in 2014. It's probably not going to be a huge amount because we need to get this ramped up, but we are going to give out some money in 2014, and that's really thanks to Lawyers for the Arts, which is a Give for Greatness fundraiser that happened in March. And if you didn't apply in 2013, you will get an opportunity. We're targeting probably early July to have the application out. Very simple application. It's for general operating, so it is one of those rare places you can go for general operating. And so again, the way to learn more about that opportunity when it comes up is to get on our website, like us on Facebook and Twitter, and sign up for our e-newsletter. That was the cheap plug for ASI at the end. I'm going to hand it back to Elizabeth, and at this point we're going to take some questions from you about any of the topics here tonight.
Thank you, Todd. Right now, Jen's going to come around with a microphone, and if you have a question, just raise your hand, and I will direct it to whoever can answer it for you.
I have a question about splitting up your annual campaign. What were some of the criteria or data that you used to decide who gets asked and when?
I'm going to have to punt a little bit, I'm sorry to say, because I think that pattern was established before I started there. At least somehow it had settled such that the theater was doing the end of the calendar year appeal and then one in the spring. And shortly after I was there, we started to give contemplation to whether or not we could do a third one. Was there a kind of audience out there that we hadn't tapped into? So we did an appeal in the summer, and we kind of mined our own existing database, to look for perhaps a smaller segmented group of people, and I apologize, I don't remember what they were, but perhaps it was donors who hadn't given in like 3 years or something. And then we also did a little bit of sort of prospect researching, if you will, and sort of cold mailed to individuals in the like Williamsville, Amherst zip codes. So they were people who had not, at least as far as we could tell based on our records, demonstrated any kind of interest in or support of the theater. So it was a bit of a gamble. But we did pick up some people. So our summer campaign ended up being smaller than the other two, and I apologize that I can't really address how it is that those first two kind of started out that way.
Yeah, I have a question for Colleen. Every once in a while you see like the adult education and that they have courses on grant writing. Are those worth taking? Did you learn enough at those courses?
Well, the real challenge is, can you afford to take the one that costs $2,000 or $3,000? So I think any course is worth it. You can always pick up a helpful hint. It gives you practice. It makes you focus for the day. Or if it's an ongoing course for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, go once or twice a week. I would do it just for exposure. And just force yourself to practice and get feedback from the instructor. I'd say go for it.
One free resource from the public sector that you might consider is anyone who does the RFP responses. They may be willing to share their ideas, maybe things that they know that you don't have to pay for that education.
Hello, I'm one of those novices that you spoke of, so I'm going to ask a very simple question. When trying to work with a vendor, would you say that it's a smarter idea to send something through the mail first, or is it a good idea to try and make contact with somebody in person?
This is a vendor that you've already established a business relationship with, that you're working with, that you're purchasing services or goods from them?
Either or.
Well, if it's someone who's already kind of providing something to you, then hopefully you or someone in your organization might know who within their organization is their representative. So, you know, try and cultivate some kind of personal relationship with that rep. And if you're just starting out, well then, you know, find out who in the organization you need to be dealing with. You know, as I said before, and I think Maria and Catherine would agree, so much of this is about personal relationships. So even when you're dealing with a corporate entity, whether it's a for-profit business, whether it's a foundation, you want to establish personal relationships. You know, reach out to the executive director or whoever is managing those foundations. Reach out to the people in a vendor or a potential vendor and just begin to establish that relationship. And, you know, they're looking for business too, so they're going to hopefully be interested in doing the same kind of thing with you.
One thing our company suggests, because a lot of times when you're looking for sponsorships, it's the same thing. Map out the organization, put it up on a whiteboard, cyber snoop, go online, find out who their marketing folks are, and find out who the key stakeholder is, and then think about how you're going to approach them. What value can you give them?
And the other thing I would add to that is, as you're mapping out the needs of your organization, one thing we didn't talk about tonight is in-kind donations. But in-kind donations basically mean instead of someone writing you a check, they make it so that you don't have to write someone else a check. So if you have printing needs and you can get that printing covered as a donation, that's another form of sponsorship. It's another form of donation to your organization. And so as you're, for instance, planning an event and thinking about all of the things you're going to have to pay for, what places might donate the room or give it to you at a discount because you're a nonprofit. I hate to say it this way, but when you pick what restaurants to go to in your private life, right? Not just your business lunches, but your private life. If you're going to chains, your probability of getting them to maybe donate something, unless they do have the flexibility at a local level, at a branch level, might not be great. But if you're going to your local restaurant, now, everyone gets hit up. I mean, the story was told one time that the Village Beer Merchant, they donated to the first organization that came and asked them for a basket. And then a week after that event happened, they had 50 more requests for donations because everyone came to that event like, ooh, Village Beer Merchant, they're donating. All right, let me get into this. So it's best to have the relationship established. And think about the places you go, not only for work, but in your private life. Keep going there. Establish that relationship, and you're more likely then to get them to do something for you, for your organization. And by the way, even if they say no the first time, or even before you've asked them, invite them to something you do. Have them come and see who you are and what you do. I mean, if you've gotten to know these folks, chances are you've told them what you do for them. Chances are they might be interested. Bring them in. Comp them a ticket. I mean, there's some rules with like elected officials and such, but not with the owner of your dry cleaning shop or the manager of the restaurant you go to or whatever. So just some thoughts, but it might get that giving a check is hard, but they might give you the same amount they were looking for because it actually costs them less as a donation because their food, it's the retail idea. If I'm paying $100 for this food, it didn't cost that person $100, but they can give you $100 worth of sponsorship at a lower amount.
Hi, thank you for doing this. It's very informative. Ted mentioned earlier about an arts program within human services. That's what I do. And I've been very successful in writing grants from other sources and doing my own fundraising outside of our foundation for our agency. However, it's a double-edged sword. I've been so successful that I'm so busy. What I'm wondering is, are there any grants out there for a body, for a person? Because my agency won't let me hire anyone. I get an intern over the summer that's paid for, but that's it.
Unfortunately, because you're not an arts organization, my answer is only going to be half useful. But there are some categories, for instance, in New York State Council on the Arts, in some of their state and local partnership programs and a few other programs, some of the entry-level grants are actually capacity-building grants. And one of the options is to be able to hire someone, specifically. Through the Regional Economic Development Council grants last year, there was essentially a paid internship program, but it was a year-long program that they would pay up to 70% of the person's salary. They were recruiting interns, like graduate level interns from local the state university system. And so that was another option. And again, very few of those applications came from Western New York, especially on that intern program. And it was meant for small organizations, for organizations under a certain budget size. So the ones I've seen have tended to be for younger organizations, for newer applicants, and for smaller organizations, for that kind of capacity building. But they are out there. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with the social service side.
I can't be much help either, except to suggest AmeriCorps is another way to get a body at very low cost. I think it's about $8,000 a year to the organization, and you get really nice young people who are interested in service work.
This is sort of like a follow-up to the last question. You mentioned in kind. Are you able to do like hours or labor as an in kind, and then would that count as like a sponsorship, or is that a gray area, or so is it just like goods, or can you also give services in kind?
I know that some organizations, specifically corporations, allot hours for their employees to go and volunteer. So they'll be given a half day off work to go and volunteer to a corporation approved, corporate sanctioned event. That's about the best that I can get.
Just to piggyback on that, certain, however Catherine categorized them, like some of the corporate foundation grantors, thinking of the banks, when you write an application to them, they will frequently ask if you have volunteer opportunities for their employees, because they would like to be able to plug their employees into the community that way. There are surely, I think, ways that organizations can use volunteers, especially individuals, if you can't kind of tap into a corporate volunteer opportunity. For instance, at Musical Fair, our ushers are all volunteer. So that's a terrific resource that we have donated to us that counts as an in-kind, positive in our budget. And we have about 150 of them, and if we had to pay people to usher for 180 or 200 performances a year, it would drastically change our budget. So yes, of course, a person's labor and time is very much as valuable as treasure.
Any other questions?
All right, well, thank you, everybody. 1 to 2. It's at the Central Library, and it will be on the nonprofit revitalization